welcome to the Fresh and Fired Up Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Marshall, here with my co-host, the wild, wonderful Haley Pindle, who decided to join us today. I just love throwing that in.
You always throw that in, and honestly, like 99.9% of the time, I'm here, and then
you miss like 2 episodes, and then I just decide to bring that up every time.
Yeah, that's
we are here to help you function at your best in health, fitness, and life. So let's get fired up.
Let's get fired up.
Doing it, and we are joined today by the dynamic duo behind the podcast Eat More Carbs, a period recovery podcast. So make sure you check out their podcast as well. Their names are Reilly and Jenna Fisher. I am pumped to have both of you on. We are pumped to have both of you on the show today. And the background that I have found about you, and then you can fill in more details. Reilly, former D1 athlete and founder of Reilly Beatty Sports Nutrition. After years of restricted eating and you had a really bad ACL injury I read up on, she has made it her mission to help active women and high-level athletes fuel their bodies with more freedom and be able to perform at their best without having to sacrifice their health along the way, which is an excellent mission. And we also have Jenna Fisher, a running dietitian who helps women hit PRs. Yeah, that's awesome. Recover their cycles and enjoy their food again. And together they are rewriting some rules on what it means to eat, train, and thrive as female athletes. So welcome to the show. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
We're so excited to be here.
Yeah. So we're looking at wanting to dive into some specific questions for you guys about underfueling, specifically for athletic women. But before we get too into like the nitty gritty of details, did you guys want to fill in any more gaps on your background for our listeners?
Reilly, you can go first.
Let's start from birth.
Not from birth. Let's just fast forward a little bit.
Yeah. The relevant details. You want to go first, Jenna?
Oh my gosh. Sure. I'm originally from Colorado, and I was lucky enough to match at the dietetic internship through the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. And lo and behold, the co-intern was Reilly Beatty. And that's how we met. And we had this dream of having a business one day that would help female athletes like grow big and strong. And that's kind of like where this idea started years and years ago. And then fortunately enough, Reilly and I stayed in contact, stayed really good friends. And when the time came where we could kind of fulfill that dream, we did. So Reilly can definitely fill in a little bit more about starting the business. And I joined later after that. But that's kind of how like I got here, I guess, is the best way to say that.
That's awesome. Okay, so give us some more details then, Reilly.
Yeah, no, it's just so like it's been such a whirlwind. So I started RBSN in like 2020, and Jenna and I always had a goal of like seeing each other. I feel like once a year. That was our goal in our dietetic internship. And now I feel like we're lucky enough that we get to talk like every single day running this business. And we really focus on, just like you mentioned, female athletes, right? Like that's our passion, and specifically like period recovery. We're doing so much period recovery work right now. I know y'all talk a lot about this too, but there's just such a need in this community right now. And there's this problem that is affecting female athletes that has been ignored for so long. So we're super excited to kind of chat about that today, and just anything related to fueling female athletes.
Yeah, I love that. Also, I had a question. I know, Reilly, I told you this in the DMs, but your podcast name, I absolutely love it. I don't know why. It's just the best ever. How did you guys come up with that?
So kind of a funny story, but I remember looking up podcast names when wanting to start the Eat More Carbs podcast. And I was like, kind of just, preliminary stages of looking up the podcast. So I typed in carbs to Apple Podcasts. Every single thing that came up was how to eat a low carb diet, how to go low carb as an athlete, why you should be low carb as a female athlete. And I was like, we need to rewrite the script because so many people are scared of carbohydrates. So like, why not do something that's completely opposite, but also it's science backed. So let's talk about how you should eat more carbohydrates as a female athlete.
I love that.
You were like, let's just do the opposite. That's great. So many of our listeners are active women. I would say some of them would consider themselves or are athletes, and some of them are not. They're wanting to be healthy, live their lives, feel good, and that's great too. So I think we can speak to that whole audience with this topic, because even if you're just going about your everyday life, there are so many women that are under fueling, even if they're not like extreme athletes. So I want to just dive into the topic of like, being praised. People are like, women are praised for like their discipline and their ambition and their intensity in a sense nowadays, especially in the athletic world. And I think behind the scenes, they can be running on empty. And so what are some signs that someone might be under fueling without realizing it?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I think so many times what we hear from athletes is like, we didn't know what we didn't know. And if you are under fueling, not understanding the amount of lack of energy that you are functioning on is super common, and it's hard to recognize. And increasing fueling and changing that, and then that feeling of finally having energy is such an eye opener and like a light bulb moment for so many female athletes, where all of a sudden they're like, I have energy. I had energy throughout my entire training session, my entire game, my entire race, and I didn't even know that was possible. So it is so hard to recognize some of those like preliminary signs of underfueling. Obviously, Reilly, I'll let you kind of talk to some of the more obvious or bigger signs of underfueling, like loss of a period that we talk a lot about, but it is hard sometimes to recognize whether or not you are underfueling, for sure.
I think one of the most challenging things about identifying underfueling is because everybody's symptoms look a little bit different. There's not like a one size fits all when it comes to underfueling. And I think one of the biggest shockers for a lot of female athletes is you can still have a regular menstrual cycle and be underfueled, which nobody's talking about. So
Let's talk about it.
Exactly, right? Let's talk about it. So when we look at, right, kind of just maybe some of the signs and symptoms besides this low energy that female athletes might experience, I think one of the big things is like a big focus on food. Like if you're always thinking about food, that's a huge red flag to me that you're probably underfueling. If you're not able to live your life outside of sport, you're probably underfueling. Jenna's our running dietitian, and I don't want to steal this from her, but she works with a lot of runners. And if you are going on your long run or you're going through a hard training session and then you're on the couch for the rest of the day, that's a sign of underfueling. And it might not be affecting you during your workout or your training, but it's affecting you in your life. And that's a big red flag for underfueling.
Yeah, that is. Haley,
Yeah.
what do you want to say?
So it's funny too, because I'm sure you guys see a lot of this where it's like it affects your sleep, it affects your digestion, it affects all of these other things too. And people try and fix that one symptom. They're like, oh, I have SIBO, I have all this other stuff, where they're trying to fix their gut health. But in reality, like that big domino effect is going to be from eating more. But people are so resistant to eating more because it's like, oh, I'm going to gain weight. And this is going to be the worst thing of my entire life if I gain weight. So just like curious, how do you guys attack that belief system? Like if someone is deathly like afraid of gaining weight or eating more, how do you guys attack that?
Reilly, you want to kick it off with that answer?
I think we talk about this every day because Haley, like exactly what you just said, like the GI is one of the systems that gets downregulated with underfueling, and bloating, digestive issues. Those come hand in hand with underfueling. But like, how do you navigate eating more when you feel bloated all the time? Like that is such an uncomfortable feeling, and having to train your mindset to be like, okay, if I eat more food, this will actually help my bloating is such a mind like twist, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think the huge thing that we see is like small sustainable changes. Like how can we slowly integrate proper fueling? How can we, start to provide our body with enough energy so that it can upregulate some digestive things? Small sustainable changes are going to be so effective.
Yeah. What does that kind of look like? Like what kind of slow sustainable changes would you be referring to?
I think there are a lot of different ones, and it definitely depends on the person that we're working with as far as what they feel most comfortable with. Some of the easy ones that I can kind of think of right off the bat are making sure that you're fueling before your training session or your run, making sure that you're refueling after. If you are a runner and you aren't using intra-run fuel, should you be using intra-run fuel? So things like that we can start to kind of slowly tweak. Can we add a little bit to this meal? Can we change it so that way we have an additional snack in the evening? It just the answer that most dietitians give almost all the time is it depends. So I think it depends on the athlete, which one that they feel most comfortable with making, but just making sure that it is something that they do feel comfortable with, and then implementing that and staying consistent with it.
Yeah, that's good. Something I was thinking of as you were saying that, and I think in case you haven't experienced this, so my background is in chiropractic care, and just another thing that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, thinking about like your GI tract motility and even the psychological like anxiety around underfueling, all of that. From a physiological standpoint, getting adjusted, like getting your spine and nervous system adjusted, can actually like significantly improve your cortical function to calm your anxiety around. This is kind of more of a global like systemic health thing. But easy hack, guys, I know we talk a lot about like deep breathing and these sort of things to like calm our nervous system or calm our anxiety around anything, but also like including this topic, right? Getting adjusted is super duper helpful for that. And it's like an easy hack. So something you guys can just keep in the back of your mind with your clients too.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people
Recovery.
don't realize that.
I feel like recovery too is so underrated. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of clients where it's like, I'm just going to go and train hard. I can sleep when I'm dead kind of thing, where it's like recovery is the yin to the yang. Right.
Yes.
And so you can't have one without the other. And like you can't perform optimally without necessary recovery. Right. So in terms of some of the athletes that you've worked with, or some of the athletes that you can think of, what are some of the best recovery practices? So like maybe sleep or any kind of thing like that you guys use that can help with down regulating, getting out of that symptomatic like GI issues, stress, high cortisol kind of era.
Do you want to go, Reilly?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. Two big things. I think sleep, Haley, like you mentioned, like is so, so, so important. So I actually have a rule with a lot of my clients, and I say, like, if you get less than 6 hours of sleep, like you don't get to train. So because we have to have sleep. I think the second thing is we can't cut our calories and our energy down on our rest and recovery days, because I think a lot of people approach a non-training day or a rest day as a non-training day, not a recovery day. And if you're dropping your energy intake, you're not focused on carbohydrates, you're not prioritizing your sleep, maybe you're drinking on these days, right? Your schedule's off. That's not a recovery day. That's just a non-training day. And a lot of people make this big mistake. And even from like a performance standpoint, it's really going to hurt your performance.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. I love that distinction between like a recovery day versus just a day you're not training. Yeah, good one. Do you have anything else to say on that, Jenna?
I think just taking recovery days. I think there are a lot of female athletes that feel a tremendous amount of pressure to train all the time and just neglect taking a recovery day, even if it's similar to what Reilly just mentioned, where they're not training in the typical sense, but we're still trying to hit like 10,000 steps, or, still trying to move a lot with stretching or yoga. And we associate those lighter movements or less intense movements with not training, but that's still movement. And no matter how you move your body, it still counts. And making sure that you are taking intentional recovery days versus just reducing training or not training at the same intensity level.
Mm-hmm. So what would be some more things you would recommend to someone to help them actually be able to take those days? Like like laying out a plan for themselves? Like what do you usually coach people through with that?
I think it, again, just depends on the athlete, but we look at their overall training and we try to implement recovery days on the days that they need it most. So is there a long run on the weekend that we could implement a recovery day prior to or after to make sure that we are recovering from that or preparing for that? So that's what I kind of think of from a running standpoint, is making sure that we're like bookending a long run if that's part of your plan, but just making sure that we do have them implemented. And again, like in a slow and sustainable way, incorporating them into your plan if it's not something that isn't part of your practice.
Yeah.
I can add something here too on
Please
this. With our athletes, right? We want them training. We do a lot of period recovery, but we want to keep people doing what they love. And I think too, just like Jenna mentioned, when we're looking at their schedule, we're really taking a quality over quantity approach. So is this 20,000 steps like actually aiding in your training, or what's the purpose of this? So really looking at the quality of the training and the workouts and figuring out like, how do we keep you training to help you maximize your performance, but then also make sure that you're fueling and recovering properly.
Yeah. Something that popped up, a question for me while you guys were speaking on this, is I'm sure you guys also have some experience with this, but the identity shifting that needs to occur while you go through this process. You guys can speak to this on your story. Like, how did you go from like, you hold so much of your value in being an athlete to kind of going through this period recovery or any kind of recovery and then ending up being sort of a different person? You know what I mean?
Yeah, go for it, Reilly.
I don't know if I like shifted my identity. I think I just realized that there's like more to being an athlete than just training. And I think that was a big mistake that I made, like being a college athlete, is I thought like what I was doing outside of sport like didn't matter. So like the recovery piece, the sleep piece, the prevention piece. You know, I tore my ACL first game of my senior year. Like the research is still out, is that preventable of an injury? But right, like I was never prioritizing the things outside of sport. And then like now being, 20 years older than I was in high school, and like still trying to, at least compete the way that I compete, it's like I still have that athlete identity, but like I realize that there's so much more to it than just sport. And like I wouldn't be able to still train the way that I did if I wasn't, again, recovering, fueling my body properly, doing mindset work, all of that stuff.
I think that speaks a lot to the longevity of staying an athlete, because in order to continue to be competitive in whatever way that looks like for you, you have to have the fueling component, because your body isn't going to continue to kind of be able to function off of low energy availability and allow you to continue to do that. So I think that's a big thing that Reilly hit on just there with like her own journey of recognizing that in order to stay active the way she wanted to, she had to kind of shift other things and make sure that she was prioritizing everything and not just training.
Yeah, that's good. And I feel like it's such a big deal when you can take that, the athlete mindset, and then start applying it to your day-to-day life, to be like, well, what is, if the goal originally was, you want to, whatever, you want to be the world champion, right? And now what's your goal now? Like I think about for myself, I'm a 38-year-old mom of 4, and I also work a lot. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, because my background is also elite athletics. And I'm like, I love the fact that I have tons of energy for my kids and the work that I do. I bring a lot of passion and enthusiasm each day. I'm not on any medications. I don't have to nap in the middle of the day. I don't have any sort of chronic health condition. And so I think about like, what is your function, right? Like, how can you function? How are you feeling? How are you operating in your day-to-day life? And I think with what you're speaking to is like allowing female athletes during their elite phase to be able to operate well in the rest of their lives, right? Like have the sleep, be able to do their schooling if they're in school and do it well, or their work or their family life. I think it's so much needs to be a full picture of health, instead of, well, this is the only thing that matters, right? Your sport, or this is the only thing that matters, your job. When it's like, no, that is such a lie. So I love that you are both speaking to this, because I think it's a really, really important narrative that I don't know, I guess just doesn't get talked about enough. because it's like, who are you taking advice from? Like, are these, you're looking up to this athlete who looks super fit and they've got trophies, but the rest of their lives are falling apart and they're like heavily medicated. That's not a picture of health, right?
Yeah, same with like highlight reels on Instagram or on social media, right? We can't really take that at face value because especially going through my own journey, I used to look at these girls, like these really lean athletes or like bikini competitors, and then I'm like, why do they have a period and I don't have a period? Where it's like, you really don't know if they do, and they likely don't, right? We have this very skewed version of what health or it should look like for women, which is also something I'm sure you guys are trying to change as well.
Yeah.
Haley, I think you just hit something like so big right there with like, what symptoms of underfueling are you experiencing? And for some people, that is unfortunately loss of a period, which feels like such an unfair symptom to have been dealt. But some of the other people that might still be underfueling and missing out on fun things in life and missing out on life experiences, their underfueling symptoms might not be loss of a period, but that doesn't mean that they're not struggling with other symptoms of low energy availability. And yes, it's a super obvious one when you don't have a period and a really difficult one to have to recover from. But when we see other people's highlight reels, we don't know what their symptoms are. And it's definitely going to be different from the ones that we're experiencing, but that doesn't mean that they don't have their own struggle. And I think that we kind of just assume that we're the only ones that are having a hard time sometimes with the social media highlight reel that we all see.
Yeah. I've heard it said like people always want someone else's suffering, but
Ooh.
we all have our own things that we suffer with. And I think it's learning to suffer well and overcome challenges and find the information and get the help. Like what you ladies are doing so well is like offering the help and trying to spread a message that is actually true. There's times when it's like, some of this messaging that is out there is just not. And so I think that can be a hard thing to navigate too, but I would love to hear your take on, we've been talking about period recovery and performance, and what would be, give us in a synopsis on why a regular cycle is such an important sign of health and the message you would give to women who have kind of normalized missing their period.
Reilly, I'll let you speak on like the health component of it, but I just want to say before we get into some of that just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
For sure. When it comes to loss of a period, because a lot of people do unfortunately experience that. And we've been told so many times that, oh, it's normal for a female athlete to lose her period in the middle of peak season and it's okay. It'll come back. It's no big deal. And that's not the case. That's definitely the narrative that we want to change around the idea of not having a period.
Yeah, it's not okay.
It's not okay. And before we get into some of like the benefits of a normal menstrual cycle, a lot of female athletes do not realize how active they are. And a lot of female athletes do not identify themselves as an athlete. So they don't think that they are struggling with low energy availability. We hear this all the time. Like I probably get like 5 DMs a day about this where people are like, I don't have my period, but like I'm not really an athlete. And I'm like, okay, let's look at your training schedule. And like girlies in the gym, like 14, 15 hours a week. Like, you're an athlete. You don't have to be in an organized sport or competition to be labeled as an athlete.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So why this is important, I guess, for female athletes is the menstrual cycle, on a very just like simple way of looking at it, is a vital sign, right? It's a signal that things are happening and things are functioning properly within the body, right? If our body is not optimized, it's not healthy, we're not going to have a normal menstrual cycle because the reproductive system is a lower tier priority compared to like the brain, the heart, the vital organs, right? And those are going to be top priority for fueling because those are top priority for survival. So our body starts to downregulate certain systems like the reproductive tract and our GI, hello bloating, when we're in a low energy availability state as a way to preserve function of these other vital organs. So we start to see a drop in estrogen, which estrogen is an anabolic hormone. It's so important for building. It's so important for so many body processes. And we just start to see, again, this downregulation and this drop in estrogen, which affects so many different processes in the body and just has a really big toll overall on female athlete health.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's such an important thing for us to be bringing up here. And I don't know, maybe it's my mom brain that always thinks this, but it's also so important to be educating younger girls.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we brought this up on another recent episode, but it's like, so I think the same story happens over and over again. Just like, oh yeah, back when I was 16, I didn't realize this mattered. It's like, how do we get this message to younger, like to teenagers who are training a ton, or like their parents? We need to
share
the
keep doing
show.
stuff like
Guys,
this.
share the show. Share the show. Come on.
Yeah,
Anyways,
everyone,
sorry.
this is your sign. This is your sign to hit subscribe and share this with every single woman that you know.
Yeah, because if you don't have, like, if you are a mom and you've got kids in sports and parents, like sports parents get nuts about their kids, like doing well in the sport, you guys know. And it's like, but they don't have a health background themselves. They really don't have the tools to support their kid.
Yeah. And I think it's super interesting too, like, when you do go through puberty, you have the weight gain and it's super normal and things like that. But I don't think that's also talked about a lot, because just like personal experience, it's just like, oh, you're getting fat or you're fat now or something like that, where it was like, no, that was supposed to happen. And like the fact that I went on a diet and lost my period was not supposed to happen. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah,
just getting the message out to parents where it's like, this is more of a performance thing. Like you should not focus more so on like what your body looks like, more so how are you performing? How do you feel? How is your every other bucket of life, right? Like emotionally, physically, mentally, how are you doing? So yeah, doing great work.
Yeah,
I
I'm a
think
huge advocate of the Renaissance body. Like
Yes.
we see Renaissance paintings of women, and you're like, oh, they're so fertile and like. Anyways, just side note. But what were you going to say, Jenna?
I think it's just so sad that we have convinced females and female athletes that we're supposed to just remain small our whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, we should be having a conversation that like your body is meant to change. We don't look the same that we did when we were born, and we are supposed to grow and mature, and that's a good sign of health overall. And instead we go through puberty, and just like you mentioned, like we're told no, we should diet or we should change so that we remain the same that we were pre-puberty. That's so sad that we're not having a conversation that's educating about, okay, these are the changes that are happening within your body, and they're a good sign that you are moving in the direction of like growing, and that growth is good.
Yeah. I love that. So what would you say, like, how do you help clients move from this fear of fuel to eating more? Like breaking through some more of these barriers. Give us some more ideas for that. Reilly, do you want to speak to that? She's like, no, I don't know what to tell you. Come on.
I think it goes, it's just like so individualized, right? And I just even think about like the conversations I've had this morning with clients, and like I feel like we're having the same conversations, but like little ones too. And I think continuing the conversation, like what we're doing now, and just like continuing bringing awareness and like changing the conversation, because we can sit on this podcast and we can talk about this. We can go on to our podcast and we can talk about this, but then there's also going to continue to be negative messaging out there. So we just have to like, I feel like group together as like a group of, of women, and be like, we have to change this narrative, because it has to happen like on a systemic level.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree.
the system. I definitely agree with that. And then it's also interesting too, because you're also the controller of your environment, what you consume in terms of social media, right? And I feel like some people want to stay in the belief system of like, you probably see this a lot, where it's like they just want to supplement, and like, my body is not ovulating just because I'm missing Vitex. I promise. This is the only reason why, which is obviously not true. But they're like looking for ways to kind of get out of it and getting out of doing the hard work. But yeah.
I think we definitely see this where people have convinced themselves like, oh, it's that I have, GI issues, or it's this or it's that. And they want to like make something that is pretty complicated simple, because we like to simplify things, first of all. But I think it's like the stage of change in which they're in. They've maybe recognized that there is a problem and something that they should be addressing, but maybe they aren't ready to go through the recovery process quite yet. They're still in that like pre-contemplation. I know there's a problem, but I don't know that I'm quite ready to like go through all the hard work. Because one of the things that like I can guarantee is that it is hard work. Recovering your period isn't an easy thing to do. And I think that that can be like a little bit intimidating. So doing the things that you do feel comfortable with first and starting there is a great place to just start the journey. And whether that's listening to this podcast or going onto parts of the social media world that do support period recovery versus the parts that encourage like skinny talk and things like that, to surround yourself with like positive messaging around body image if that's a fear of yours. So just doing the things that feel comfortable versus trying to jump in too fast if you aren't quite ready to make the change or start the recovery process.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. And I feel like it's listening to the right voices. I just had a conversation with my 12-year-old daughter about this recently, where it's okay, you need to be humble enough to receive feedback from people, but you also have to very much consider what the source is. Is it your mom or your dad or someone who loves you and cares about you and wants the best for you? Is it a random person on the internet or the bully at school or whatever that's like giving you their opinion or their judgment, and you're like, you know what, water off a duck's back. There are certain people you don't have to listen to. And I was thinking about this, and this is a bit of a hot take, so you can let me know if you have a different opinion on this, but I'm going to share a bit of my personal story, which is who I've received feedback from. And I come from a background of gymnastics, so you're getting judged on all the aesthetics, right? Like everything. And when I look back at my journey on body image, most of my mental issues have come from other women judging me. So whether it was like a very intense coach or judge, or just other women who I don't know, in my life, who are like, oh, you're looking thin, or, oh, you're like, I'm sorry. I experienced a lot of judgy females that really affected my mindset. And so when I have these conversations with my husband, he has absolutely loved and supported me and my body and told me I'm beautiful through all the phases of like weight gain through pregnancy and like postpartum and breastfeeding and like being super fit and athletic. And so I think about, I'm like, maybe that's not the same for everyone. Maybe you have been criticized by a man, but we were having this conversation being like, lots of times I feel like it's women doing it to other women. So I think it's very important as women to have these conversations and be uplifting to other women so that they're not feeling just judged all the time by you. I don't know. Does that, like, are you guys in opposition to that opinion, or have you ever experienced that?
I can think of specific examples, maybe even from clients that I've worked with that have received like positive feedback around body changes that were like weight loss related, that were when they were struggling the most with their relationship with food, when they did not have a period, and how much of an impact that made on them, because they were like, wow, I'm receiving way more attention for what I look like externally than I did before. And I think that's really hard, that we only compliment other women when we see something that we think society deems as attractive or society deems as something that should be rewarded, when in reality, like, we should be encouraging one another no matter what. And it shouldn't be based on our outward appearance. Like, we say this all the time, but like, the way that you look is the least interesting thing about you. And there are so many other things that we can compliment other women on, like their performance, like being a mom of 4 who works and has a podcast. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's incredible. I don't have kids, but I can't imagine working full time, having a podcast and having 4 children to raise. Like, that's amazing. And we don't often like recognize the other accomplishments that we have in life. Instead, we're like, oh, you've lost 5 pounds. You look great. And it's like,
Yes.
wait, what? Like, that's what we're going to take away from this. That's what we're going to encourage, is how, like, that's crazy. That's so sad that instead of saying like, wow, Haley, got your period back, that's incredible, like, let's celebrate that. Instead, maybe somebody said something to you about positively reinforcing maybe when you were struggling with your relationship with food. And in reality, we should just be like, encouraging each other for the things that we do rather than the way that we look.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I love the self-confidence too that kind of molds you, where it's like I can think back to when I didn't have a period and I was really struggling with my food. Where those comments were like, I didn't have self-confidence myself, so I held so much power and so much weight to those compliments that was a large reason why I didn't want to give it up. It was because like my whole self-image, like if you think of a pie chart, a very small sliver was my studies, a very small sliver was my career, and the rest was my body and food. So like when you think about it, taking that away, or like even having that threatened to be taken away, was super scary, right? And so like having that kind of noting in your brain that these comments, and either compliments or comments on if you've gained weight, do have a lot of weight for different sorts of people, right? So just don't comment on it. Just comment on something that's a little bit more broad, rather than like having it be more body focused, because you don't really know how that affects somebody. So
Yeah, or your effort or your growth, or
yeah.
like the virtues, right? I think just to give practical examples, right? Just being like focusing on people's character rather than only their outward appearance. I think that's huge. Reilly, did you have any thoughts?
I think this kind of just goes back to like, I just said no and then I have thoughts, but it kind of
No,
goes
but
back.
yes.
No, but listen up, everybody. I think it just goes back to like, this is a systemic issue, right? Like, because I think oftentimes like people are not trying to be mean or negative when they're commenting on a body. They are trying to maybe, just like give a compliment or something, but unfortunately it often does more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like I have been guilty of doing that myself, like before I even went through this. And now I'm very, very mindful of what I say to other people in terms of like body wise, just because I've gone through this and I know the power that it holds. And if I can just redirect that to something that's a little bit more helpful, then all the power to me. Like, obviously, I want to do that. So, again, like having these podcasts and then you guys also sharing on your podcast, just to bring awareness that like maybe your words do more harm than good sometimes, even if you don't intend for that to happen.
Yes.
And just having that in your brain the next time you see someone who has lost weight. Maybe they're sick, maybe they're struggling with an illness, like you have absolutely no idea.
Yes. No, it's so true. And unless you know the full background of someone, so like I had someone comment on, I had posted a deadlift of I'm doing a deadlift on my stories. Okay. And I kind of like, it was an encouragement about body image for women. And I get a message from a person that's just like, oh, by the way, if you put your feet closer together, and it gives me this whole like critique in my DM. And I'm like, okay, thanks. But I just think about something like that even. And I'm like, do you know how many people are just trying to work up enough courage to put themselves out there in the public eye? And now you're going to like give them this, you don't even really know them, and you're going to give them this whole critique. And me in that moment was like, okay, well, you don't know my health history. You don't know how many back injuries I've had, and that I can't actually move that right foot anymore because of, something I did in gymnastics years ago. But my point is like, just speaking to what you're saying is, if you don't know the person's full story, how about first you just get to know them? Ask them a question, right? Like get to know them as a person rather than jumping right to the critiques or even the compliments, and if they're all image based. Anyways, I was wondering, is there anything else that I'll get off my soapbox now? I'm on a rant. I woke up in a great mood, right, Haley?
You what's the right word? Like a heightened state, I would say.
A heightened state, yeah. I was a little edgy before we started because I was getting some. Oh
feedback.
Man, we had some attitude. I still coach gymnastics, and sometimes you just, those 12-year-old girls can give you attitude, and you gotta stay composed. So I was just telling Haley about it. But anyway, is there anything else that you guys have, like, it just comes up for you a lot in your world that we haven't touched on that you would love to talk about, that we haven't asked you? You guys don't have any rants? Am I the only ranter in the crowd here? Come on, you're making me feel like
You're
too
the
much of
best
a rant.
MC. You're the best MC. We've already established that.
You don't have time for my rants. We'd be here for 5 hours. I'm not going to do that to you.
We need a 4-minute rant or like a 2-minute rant. Come on.
I think the last thing I'm going to say is that a lot of the times female athletes feel like they're alone on this journey. And it's big thing is it's not just you. It's not just you. And also like recovery is possible. Like fueling your body properly, being confident in your body, having a good relationship with food. It is something that is possible. And a lot of athletes are going through this journey right now. And it is something that you can do if you put your mind to it. And like Jenna mentioned earlier, like it is hard, but you can do hard things as an athlete.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you are going through recovery, some of the uncomfortable symptoms and side effects of the recovery process, yes, they're hard, but that doesn't mean that they're permanent. And just like Reilly said, you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, just having that momentum, like starting is the hardest part, whether it's whatever goal you have, whether fat loss, period, regain, like starting is the hardest part. Once you have that little bit of momentum and that little bit of proof behind you that, yeah, I can do hard things, then it becomes more of a wheel forward rather than a complete, like, I can't do this, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And when in doubt, guys, just to wrap this up, if you're not sure what to say to a person, just tell them to have the best day of their life. Right, Haley?
Every day is the best day of my life.
I know. And so you should tell other people, have the best day of your life, guys. Like, come on, you can do this.
It's true.
I love it. I have so appreciated, well, we have, I would say, right, Haley? We have so appreciated having both of you on today. And you just, yeah, you're doing great work. And if you were listening to this and anything has struck a chord with you, we are here to help and support. Please reach out to any one of us. You can do it. We're going to leave the details to connect with Reilly and Jenna in the description of this podcast. We want to support you on your journey. We love and appreciate you, and make sure you share this episode with a friend, because we want to help more women feel awesome in their bodies and function at their best. Make sure you also subscribe to the show, especially our YouTube channel. We need some help with that, guys.
We're on the come up. We're on the come up.
We started late on the YouTube channel, so we're just tiny. But if you share the show, maybe it will grow. So in the meantime, be free, feel fresh, and live on fire.